Dans le cadre de l'élaboration d'une résolution sur l'Europe des libertés, j'ai souhaité inviter un représentant de la Commission à présenter la politique de la Commission en termes de promotion, de renforcement et de défense des droits et des valeurs de l'Union européenne dans le cadre du maintien de sociétés ouvertes, démocratiques et inclusives. Dans ce cadre, j'ai le plaisir d'accueillir ce matin M. Stefaan De Rynck, chef de la représentation de la Commission européenne en Belgique, et je vous donne la parole.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. En tant que chef de la représentation de la Commission en Belgique, évidemment, je suis un ami des régions et des régions à compétences législatives, certainement aussi. Donc, je vais m'exprimer majoritairement en anglais, mais aussi un peu en français, on this very important subject of the rule of law and individual rights and freedoms, which is fundamental for the European space of freedoms as well as security and justice, but also for the functioning of the internal market. It is crucial that all authorities, local, regional, national, but also companies and citizens can have trust in the independence of the judiciaries in each of the countries. Before I review a number of instruments that the European Commission and the European Union is using to promote and defend the rule of law and individual freedoms and fundamental rights, let me just say very briefly one word on Ukraine also in this context. The aggression by Russia in Ukraine is also the aggression of an authoritarian regime against a democratic and free country, and also therefore an attack on fundamental rights and individual rights of people in Ukraine. We stand in different ways with Ukraine as part of our European family, obviously to support Ukraine with military, financial, economic means. But in the context of rule of law, I should mention 2 points here, I think, which is one is the issue of war crimes, where recently the European Commission has proposed to reinforce Eurojust, the agency in charge of judicial cooperation based in the Netherlands, to also help the Ukrainian authorities and the prosecutor in Ukraine to collect evidence and document war crimes that are committed in Ukraine. This, of course, will be very important in the context of international justice also in the future. The second issue is an issue of disinformation and propaganda, where the European Union took important measures to ban Russia Today and Sputnik, 2 media outlets affiliated with the Russian state, which of course raises fundamental questions on the freedom of expression, on which we have to be incredibly mindful. But it is also clear from the Commission's perspective that we need to step up the fight against disinformation and propaganda. 2 weeks ago, we proposed a new code on disinformation, and we also have new regulatory and legislative instruments in the Digital Services Act to make sure that people do not make money from the business model of proliferating disinformation on online platforms. Let me turn to the rule of law and fundamental rights in the European Union. Et je voudrais passer en revue quelques instruments que la Commission et l'Union européenne utilisent pour promouvoir et défendre l'état de droit. D'abord, un instrument de prévention qui est maintenant le rapport annuel sur l'état de droit que la Commission a mis en place en 2020. C'est un nouveau mécanisme et un cycle annuel. Un rapport qui couvre 4 grands piliers dans les 27 États membres, donc dans chaque État membre, sur le système judiciaire, sur la lutte contre la corruption, sur, troisièmement, la liberté des médias et le pluralisme des médias, et quatrièmement, dernièrement, d'autres questions institutionnelles, notamment liées à l'équilibre entre les différents pouvoirs. Et l'objectif, c'est d'avoir un dialogue politique pour prévenir les atteintes à l'état de droit, mais aussi promouvoir les bonnes pratiques. La présidence française, aussi avec le Conseil, a discuté de plusieurs findings, de plusieurs éléments que ces rapports mettent sur la table. Actuellement, la Commission prépare le 3e rapport pour juillet, qui sera accompagné par 27 chapitres sur l'état de droit dans chaque État membre. Ce rapport se base aussi sur des centaines de contributions de la société civile qui jouent un rôle crucial dans ce dossier, évidemment. Et nous prenons en compte ces contributions. La nouveauté de ce rapport en juillet sera aussi que la Commission va adresser des recommandations aux États membres pour la première fois. Let me switch to English. Beyond these political discussions, we are also legislating, obviously, as European Commission and propose new legislation. I would like to briefly single out one of the 4 aspects I just mentioned, which are part of these annual reports on the rule of law in the member states, which is the question of media pluralism and media freedom, on which the Commission has worked a lot over the past month and which is under threat in some of our member states. We are working on legislation to tackle abusive litigation against journalists and also have just closed a public consultation on the Media Freedom Act, and we are preparing now in the Commission the Media Freedom Act, which aims to have safeguards at EU level to protect the independence of media and media pluralism in each country. The Commission is not only an institution that proposes legislation and that animates political discussions, we are also the guardian of the treaty, and we have a number of important infringement procedures pending against a number of countries, which I would like to draw your attention to in the context of the promotion and defense of the rule of law and the protection of individual freedoms. One concerns judicial independence, which is unfortunately under threat in specific contexts. The Court of Justice has already ruled quite a lot in 2006, 2018 on different aspects concerning Luxembourg and Portugal on the independence of judiciaries. We unfortunately are still faced now with challenges in Poland, and one particular worry in that bigger context is also that a number of, or at least one ruling of the European Court of Justice is not fully implemented, which means that Poland faces daily penalties today in terms of implementing rulings by the Court of Justice. The Commission can obviously not tolerate a situation whereby the rulings of the Court of Justice are not fully respected by any member state. The Commission also launched another infringement procedure concerning the Polish Constitutional Tribunal and its interpretation of the Polish Constitution, which challenges the principle of the supremacy of EU law over national law. At the same time, I should stress that our door remains open for the political dialogue which we are conducting with the Polish authorities, and which also that these infringement cases do not block us from making progress at the political front. We have indeed recently closed a case against Poland concerning the retirement of Polish Supreme Court judges. In the same context of the protection of individual freedoms, let me draw attention to a number of infringement procedures which we had opened against Hungary, which concern the rights of civil society organizations, academic freedoms, the rights of migrants, asylum seekers, and also LGBTIQ people. Beyond infringements, we have now a new instrument also of budgetary conditionality, which means that the Commission can propose to the Council to suspend EU funding in case a member state breaches EU rule of law and European values in a way that endangers the protection of the financial management of the EU budget and the financial interests of the EU. And in this context, the Commission launched the conditionality mechanism toward Hungary, an ongoing procedure, and we now need to see the observations that Hungary gives to us. Let me draw your attention in this context of conditionality also to the national plans on recovery and resilience, for which the Commission borrows on the financial markets and which it recommends the Council to approve. A lot has been said recently on the Commission's recommendation to the Council to approve the plan for recovery and resilience in Poland. I should stress that that approval rests on very precise commitments by the Polish government on the independence of judges, and on measures concerning the abolition of the disciplinary chamber, the reform of the disciplinary regime, and measures also on pertain to the judges which have been affected by the past rulings of that chamber. So these Polish commitments are translated into milestones in the National Recovery and Resilience Plan and must be fulfilled before any payment takes place. Other issues I would like to flag more, and going towards a conclusion, Mr. President, for your consideration for your resolution is what is happening under Article 7 of the treaty, where there are still 2 open procedures against Poland and Hungary in terms of serious violations of the rule of law, on which under the French presidency there have been hearings in the Council in February on Poland and in May on Hungary. The Charter of Fundamental Rights is also of determining and fundamental importance in the context of the rule of law and the protection of individual freedoms. And here we also have a new instrument under the EU budget rules in terms of budget spending, which now includes a new obligation for member states to comply with the Charter of Fundamental Rights. Member states must put in place, in the context of comprehensive partnerships, bodies that are include bodies that are responsible for the promotion of fundamental rights. In the Commission's view, national human rights institutions are the obvious candidates, given their independent status and their expertise on these matters, to report to the EU and possibly also report on non-compliance with the Charter of Fundamental Rights in the context of implementing EU funding programs. And finally, we are still in negotiations also and pursuing our negotiations for the European Union to accede the European Convention of Human Rights. This is a priority for the European Union as well as for the Council of Europe. And that accession by the EU to the European Convention of Human Rights would also be a fundamental step for the protection of fundamental rights in the EU. To conclude, Mr. President, pour conclure, j'ai rapidement passé en revue des instruments qui sont nécessaires pour promouvoir et défendre l'état de droit et la protection des libertés individuelles. Il ne fait aucun doute que ces défis continueront d'apparaître dans l'avenir et que nous devrons persévérer dans nos efforts communs en vue de protéger nos valeurs fondamentales. Les instruments dont j'ai parlé sont évidemment les instruments de politique publique qui sont en revue permanente et donc nous nous réjouissons du fait que le Cadre a décidé de faire une résolution sur ce sujet qui sera aussi pour nous une source à la Commission d'inspiration et d'information pour améliorer les travaux dans ce sujet fondamental. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur De Rynck. Je me tourne maintenant vers l'Assemblée et je pense que notre collègue Moreira souhaite intervenir. Je lui donne la parole.
Muchas gracias, presidente, y muchas gracias al señor Stefaan De Rynck por la exposición que nos ha hecho. Efectivamente, la Unión Europea tiene sus principios, sus fundamentos, sus leyes fundamentales y no podemos consentir que ningún Estado las viole, como parece ser que es el caso de Polonia y de Hungría. Quería aprovechar para matizar un tema que me parece interesante. Creo que la Unión Europea hemos actuado todos unidos ante la agresión y la invasión del régimen de Putin en Ucrania. En el Parlamento valenciano, por unanimidad, el mismo día de que se cometió la agresión y la invasión, todos los grupos nos pusimos de acuerdo con una resolución y eso indica que estamos todos muy unidos por este hecho que viola todos los principios fundamentales, pero sí que me gustaría decir que sería conveniente diferenciar lo que es el pueblo ruso del régimen de Putin. Creo que hay unas 20.000 personas que han protestado y están en alguna situación de persecución por el gobierno ruso de Putin y miles han abandonado Rusia. Entonces, creo que es muy importante saber diferenciar lo que es el pueblo ruso de lo que es el régimen invasor y criminal de Putin. Creo que eso lo hace la Comisión, es correcto, pero siempre decir que las medidas que estamos tomando a nivel de la Unión Europea no son contra el pueblo ruso, sino para recuperar la democracia y acabar con la invasión. Simplemente este dato.
Y a-t-il d'autres demandes d'intervention? Je n'en vois pas. Et donc, je rends la parole à M. De Rynck pour une réaction.
Merci beaucoup. Je pense que M. Moreira soulève un point fondamental. Et je voudrais juste attirer l'attention de votre Assemblée dans ce contexte, au fait que nous soutenons en fait financièrement des journalistes russes et aussi belarusses qui sont en exil et qui travaillent dans des centres de journalisme. Et donc l'Union européenne financièrement appuie ces journalistes aussi pour que le message passe aussi de leur côté à la population russe. Et je pense que c'est un point absolument fondamental. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Monsieur De Rynck.